So I'm here in the American military village, the housing village uh, in Yangmingshan near Taipei. The construction of this started in 1951, and this housed American soldiers until 1978 when they left. Uh, and walking into this village is like walking into a time capsule. Some of the houses are completely dilapidated and falling down. There's fences around them, it's rusty. You can imagine little kids running through the streets. You can imagine the baseballs being thrown, the marbles being flicked on the side of the road, or football being thrown, depending on what season it is. And then other houses, like this one behind me, are really well kept, and it's become a restaurant. There's a few restaurants, and then directly in front of me was the border of this village, and the other side of this, it looks like a street in Taiwan, but where I'm standing, it looks like a street in 1950s America. This may be the best preserved 1950s town anywhere, American town, that is. Now, why were the Americans here? And what influence did that have on food? Well, a huge influence, actually. So American food, Americans began coming here, that this was, construction here started in 1951, but American food aid began coming in the late 1940s with about 1 million Chinese immigrants as the KMT was fighting and began to move its government here to Taiwan. That war, the Civil War in China, lasted from 1946 to 49, and the population of Taiwan in 1945 was only about 6 million people. Add 1 million to that, and you've got pressures on the food supply, you've got pressures on the prices, and so the United States begins to supplement food, not just food. They begin to do infrastructure training, infrastructure programs. They begin to do labor training and industrial training for Taiwanese workers. They also begin to send food aid. Two of the food products that they would send were products that Taiwanese were not used to having. One was milk powder. Milk is not something that is prevalent in Taiwanese food at that time. The other one is wheat. Now, you have 1 million of these people that are coming from China, and mostly what they're cooking with is rice flour or rice, not with wheat flour. There's some wheat flour, certainly, but Taiwanese diet in 1945 did not include a lot of wheat. So the Americans began shipping flour, and it's free. They distribute it through 3 different religious organizations, and people would line up at their local churches, and they would come back home with free soybeans and soy products, which they already have been using, but they would also come back with milk powder and wheat. And so they began to put this stuff into their diet. Now in 1962, the first Taiwan lobby for wheat began doing its lobby. They began to educate women on the best ways to cook with wheat, what are some good recipes, why it's so nutritious, and encourage them to use wheat in their daily snacks. And so today in Taiwan, you have a lot of breads that are really sweet, and that actually, the bread culture, the pastry culture, came from Shanghai and other places in China, as those 1 million people migrated here because there were bakers that were not Chinese that also migrated here, including a Russian baker that created the first pineapple cake, including a bakery called Florida Bakery that opened up in 1949 in Taiwan. And today, there's these sweet cake bakeries all over the place, but it's their own version. Because at Taiwan, if you go and eat a Taiwan pastry and you touch that pastry, they're all in bags here, but you can touch them, and they're not firm. The bread is not crusty. They're kind of squishy and spongy, and they're really good. But they've got wheat flour, and and Taiwanese today, they call this spongy kind of bread that we might think is a little bit odd. They call it that, if it's got good texture, they call it mian. And this would be, if a bread has good mian, it's going to be good and squishy and spongy, and you can eat it, and it's creamy, it's custardy, it's milky, and it is so yummy, actually. But this is a direct influence from the American culture, the American food aid that's coming in, this wheat flour. Gradually, Taiwanese want to develop the milling industry on their own, and so they began to ask the Americans, don't send wheat flour, but send wheat. And so that industry develops, and then hence you get the wheat lobby here in Taiwan, because it wants at that point to support the wheat industry. At the same time, you have all these 1 million Chinese that are here. Now they're integrating this wheat and milk powder into the recipes that they brought with them from China. This is by far the largest migration of Chinese to Taiwan. There had been 2 other major migrations, but those have been decades before and centuries before, and the influence of their food was certainly present. They brought rice, and they were certainly present. But this new influx of Chinese migrants and the American food aid combined go together after World War II to really change or shift or add new flavors to the Taiwanese diet. And so you can see that in the bread, the sweet breads. You can see that in the noodles, which now use a lot more wheat. Taiwanese beef noodles are not the same as other beef noodles throughout Taiwan. Now, we're not eating beef noodles here, but that's one of the biggest Taiwan staples is beef noodles, and they are different. You have a scallion pancake, which is different, which prior to the American Wheat Aid would have been baked a little bit differently. We're going to try one of those. We're also going to pop into a noodle shop and try some noodles, because after these 1 million people came to Taiwan from China, a lot of those were KMT soldiers and government officials. A lot of these soldiers, when they retired, what are they going to do? They're going to open noodle shops. And at home, when these soldiers are not retired, they're going to work every day. What are the housewives doing? Well, they're cooking. They're using this American food aid. In fact, there's so much influence. This Chinese influence is heavy after World War II. In fact, the mother, the kind of the Martha Stewart of Taiwanese baking is Fu Pei Mei, and she is the wife of a KMT soldier, and she is, everyone in Taiwan knows this. In fact, someone told me, actually someone on the show, Tiffany, who we met just a couple of days ago, told me that that when she got married, her mother passed down to her Fu Pei Mei cookbook and something else having to do with cooking. And so this is very much a part of the Taiwanese culture now, is this cooking, but that influence from the Chinese that came from the mainland China, but also the American influence of that food. And so this is absolutely, and this village is a great setting because this is where a lot of Americans lived, a lot of the servicemen lived, and American servicemen were here from they began living here from 1951, and they left in 1978 after the United States relationship with China improved, and we no longer recognized Taiwan or had an embassy here, and we withdrew our military. And at that point, we promised to provide them with defensive weapons. But by that point, the food influence is set. So really, and this is an interesting thing because we don't have this in China. We don't have this kind of the same influence in China, but we do have this in Taiwan. You don't have this American military village in China either. So it's very pretty. And the mountains are behind it. It's just a really pretty place.